Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. In this episode, I'm talking with Don Jacob. Currently serving as the Chief Innovation Officer of Bluebeam, Don has had a 3-decade-plus career rolling up his sleeves and building teams that deliver services and software that have a global impact. As part of the original startup team, he spent the past 2 decades building Bluebeam into a leading global brand in the AEC industry. Maybe you've heard of it. In this episode, we explore Don's fascinating journey from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory to co-founding Bluebeam and transforming the AEC industry along the way. Today, Don shares the origins of Bluebeam, its impact on AEC, and his vision for the future of technology in these fields, including some new things that they're cooking up. Our conversation reveals the story of how Bluebeam has evolved over 23 years to become an industry-leading tool, achieving its original mission of elevating project collaboration and document management in the AEC industry. Before we get into today's conversation, I would very much appreciate your support by subscribing to the show wherever you watch or listen. And please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That always helps the show find new people. If you'd like to receive an email from me when new episodes are published with all of the links and other information as those come out, sign up for that by becoming either a free or paid member at trxl.co. Just click the big join button in the lower right-hand corner. One of the paid membership perks are my episode analyses that I publish in my Leadership Edge newsletter. These episode briefs provide key insights for forward-thinking leaders who are seeking innovation in AEC, but are also short on time, offering the context of each conversation without the need to listen to the full episode. They're really designed to keep you updated, spark your interest, and encourage you to tune in if the ideas resonate. Leadership Edge newsletters are only available to paid supporters of Troxel Plus, and you can become one at trxl.co. To get a taste of what's on offer, you can search for Leadership Edge over at the website for previously published examples. All right, thank you for helping me pay the bills around here. Now, let's get back to the episode for today. So grab your favorite beverage, find a comfortable seat around the campfire, relax and settle in, and enjoy listening to Don Jacob as he tells us the Bluebeam story. Don, welcome to the Troxel Podcast. Great to have you.
Oh, thank you, Evan. Been looking forward to this for a while.
I'm really interested to hear your story. You have been in the software AEC tech side of things for quite a while, so maybe you can just take us on the journey that you've been on and tell the story about how all that happened.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll share a little bit, kind of the medium length background a bit. But so Bluebeam, we've been at this now for we're on year 23. Hard to believe it's been that short, that longly short of a time. And we started back in 2002. And originally some of the core work came out of work that was going on at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So there was Bluebeam based in Pasadena, Southern California. That's kind of it's the where the core is, and then now, of course, we have offices around the world, but that's been kind of our core base for a long time. But we, back in the day, so I personally worked at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory for about 11 years. Started back in '89. It was an amazing time to be there, and kind of had 2 lives there. Half my life I was working in the Deep Space Network, working with all the part of on a project where the radio signals that were coming back from the spacecraft, we'd actually be able to do science off of the radio signal, be able to figure out what the makeup of the atmosphere was of Mars and all these other planets. And that was, by far just an amazing experience. But then the latter half of my time there, we were working on the data systems around spacecraft design. And the challenge in the mid-90s was JPL was going through this period of instead of working on one large mission every decade or so, it had to evolve its way of working to do many more smaller missions in parallel. And that triggered off a whole new way of thinking about, okay, well, how do we build the tools to be able to support that better, where we can do a bunch of missions in parallel? And at the time, this is, the mid 90s, back in the day, hard to believe, but it was an era of Sun workstations, $30,000 a seat for that hardware, and then just as much for the software, whether it's computer vision, Pro Engineer, and such. And so you had these designs that you had to share throughout the project. And how do you make that where you don't have to have everybody having to have access to the CAD systems? And how do you make it where you're not having to print, ammonia prints, 3D or,
Yep.
vellums, that sort of a thing. So there was this work to look at how do we do this electronically, and that spurred some work around the PDF standard as being a really capable format for being able to take that information and be able to share it downstream, if you will.
When did the PDF, it's a little redundant, right? PDF format, portable document format, like really arrive on the scene? Because I think before that it was really EPS and file formats like that had kind of vector data stored inside them, but that's what Illustrator would write to if you wanted to write a vector drawing file to something, and transfer it to something and not lose that vector fidelity. But when did PDF show up on the scene?
Yeah, so it really, a lot of PDF has its beginnings and origination from PostScript. It was the 97, 98, John Warnock, one of the founders of Adobe, actually, he created, it was Project Carousel. It was kind of the code name for it internally. And it was a way of being able to provide published content in a consistent web format. And that's really what prompted it. And that was, I think, 97, 98 when that really became a thing. And so it was right around that time. Yeah.
When I was in architecture school, which was 92 to 97, this is the EPS file days, right? And it was like TIFFs, and on the Mac it was picked files, which nobody even knows about anymore, right? And EPS files, and we would save stuff from like PowerCAD or AutoCAD as EPS files to get them into Quark Express so we could do desktop publishing, right? Which was still kind of a new thing back then, and do our large presentation boards and pin them up on the wall, because we weren't drafting by hand on vellum anymore. We were, not all of us, but a few of us were really going down this technology roll. And there was this whole world of file formats that we had to deal with. And it was like just the nitty gritty of trying to get from here to there was such a thing. And PDF really changed the game when it came to that, because it really was this fully encapsulated file with all the fonts and the line weights and everything that you wanted for graphical representation in a file, especially as an architect, right? It was really important to communicate graphically and to have all that information there and be able to put all that in one thing and have somebody open it up on the other end and have them see exactly what you would expect them to see, and not have their computer substituting fonts and doing all of that kind of stuff that we had to worry about back then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, when Bluebeam first got started, so we actually originated out of another company. So some people left JPL to start this company, Alliance Space Systems, and they basically were known for making every Mars robotic arm that's on the surface of Mars. And it was kind of like the A team of the JPL Mechanical Design Division. People left, started this org, and they wanted to have a better way of doing work. And instead of, why would we print paper out? We're putting robotic arms on the surface of Mars. There's got to be a better way. And so
Interesting.
That's really what prompted the work. But, out of that, there was, hey, we've got to get better. We've got to get smarter, more efficient at doing this, but we need the quality. This is highly precise engineering type stuff we're doing. And so that's where, PDF is is a format for dealing with line weights, line thickness, shrinking, making sure the scale is right. All of these things are important when you're working on large format drawings, and you're making critical decisions, whether that be building stadiums or working on robotic arms on the surface of Mars. And that's really where the first 3 years of Bluebeam. So it was a technology that was incubated, kind of developed in-house at this company ASI, and then there was a decision made. We started to recognize, wow, the work that they did work for JPL for, it was Hughes Space and Com at the time, and these people started saying, "This is great. We would love to be able to use the workflows that you've developed, where using PDF as a way to be able to take that design, embed the analysis in that, use a version of the model that's embedded in the PDF as the master for building the CNC tool pads off of, being able to then run a coordinate measuring machine and validate the as design versus the as built, and embed that back in the PDF, and this becomes this effectively digital twin kind of representation of a fully dimensioned drawing with all the entities around that making up that part. Actually incorporate that in the PDF, so you got the physical thing, and then you've got the drawing that has all this encapsulated information as your configuration record. And so that concept is really what prompted us to spin out Bluebeam as a separate entity. And so the first 3 years of Bluebeam, it was step one: how do you create a high quality, easy to generate drawing out of that CAD application? So for the first 3 years, our product was push button PDF for AutoCAD and push button PDF for SolidWorks. And that really helped to get the industry over the hump of going from paper to paperless. I mean, it sounds so trite now. It sounds like, oh, that's cute, but I mean, that really, it was a big issue. The amount of money that was spent on document sets, on any project, you typically would have to do, 3 to 5 to 10 different release sets of those 500 sheet stacks of drawings, of large format drawings. And then heaven forbid you get revisions, and then you got to print those out and integrate them. And so it was a really tedious, expensive process that it helped not only the cost of printing paper, but also just lowering the friction of being able to get information from the designer, the creator, out to the people that were actually building, being able to lower that time hurdle, if you will, because it was able to get transmitted out so much quicker.
And was that really, I mean, it seems to me like, okay, if I've got AutoCAD and you've got AutoCAD, no big deal, send me an AutoCAD file. But you're probably actually talking about it where they didn't have a seat of whatever that app was, whether it was SolidWorks or AutoCAD, right? And so they needed another way to view this stuff without purchasing an expensive seat of mechanical CAD software.
Exactly. Like being able to, that was exactly it, so that whether I'm in, my browser and I can be able to very consistently view that really was the need.
Yeah, and I also think about kind of who's doing the reviews, right? It's usually the person who's been around the block a few times, knows what they're looking at, and they're not going to be the one who's like a CAD operator, right? And so there's this whole kind of learning curve of learning how to use the software, whether it's zooming and panning or actually using the software. It may be two different things, but still there's like this barrier to entry there. And so just by making basically the digital drawing board version of the output so that they could review it on a monitor and scroll around multiple pages, they're not taking up a ton of desk space. Like there's other things that people should be thinking of when we kind of go back in time. Another one's file size, right? Like these are back in the days of, like, there were still floppy drives in computers for sure, right? And bigger media was like SideQuest cartridges or zip cartridges. And if you're talking about 500-page PDFs, you're talking about rather large files, right? Because in the AutoCAD, you're when you're using the CAD program, you maybe have one or two or three drawings open at a time, depending on which version of the software you're even using. You don't have 500 sheets open. So to be able to
Right.
combine all that into one package and send that to somebody, this is was a game changer, right? It really was.
Right. Well, and it's yeah, I think there's a much bigger, broader discussion about technology adoption and how to move the industry forward, and that balance of familiar. Hey, we've got to get the project done, but let's find new ways of being able to do that more efficiently. And so again, it sounds uh, simple now, but having that way of working analog, the familiar touch
Yeah.
of paper, but now
Hmm.
able to do it in an electronic way, and then being able to benefit from doing that. Ooh, it's Bluebeam, review. So, first thing we were focused on just getting the high quality, dependable PDF files out. Then our users started saying, this is great. But now we want to be able to mark up and be able to
We want more.
actually do those technical type of documents, markups that we can have that conversation
Yeah.
about. And so that's really what drove us to develop what became Bluebeam Review, which is our desktop application, the equivalent like Adobe Acrobat, but really focused on technical document markup. The way we talk about it is that anything larger than an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, if you need to do a graphical markup, that's really what we've tuned the application to do. But taking that, helping the industry go from paper to paperless, doing it in a familiar yet forward-looking way. It's easy to talk about, but to actually do, to get the industry forward, it's a long journey.
Yeah.
You
Right.
think in oh, Bluebeam, that old, that 2D company, there, then we moved past that, and it's like, and good or bad, I mean, that the industry, this is where we are, and I think that's really what's motivated Bluebeam. Mission one, get paper to paperless, and then collaborating was a whole next phase. And then now we're at a really interesting time, given all the fact mobile AI, all the wonderful technology renaissance that we're in, and yet it's not about the technology. And so I'm a curmudgeonly, chief innovation officer at Bluebeam. I'm a curmudgeonly innovator. I absolutely love talking technology, love talking about all the cool stuff. But what has been the core of DNA of Bluebeam is the user on the project and getting the project done, and that being first and foremost. And how can we help make that better? Innovating one step at a time, and before you know it, you've changed the industry. And so
Yeah.
that's really been kind of what's been our motivation for quite a while now.
I'm curious where the name came from, going back to kind of the beginning. Where's that name Bluebeam come from?
Yeah, nothing magical about it. We spent a lot of time early on trying to figure out what would be the right name. We ended up, it really became kind of internally. We generated. We had hired a company to work with our initial marketing years ago at the very beginning, but ultimately, we settled on Bluebeam because blue, the blueprint, kind of the
Mm.
blue aspect. Beam has a structural engineering kind of architectural elements to it, and putting those two together, I think really resonated with us. And we, at the time, we were housed in Alliance Space Systems offices, and we had some of the engineers come into a room and said, hey, there were these are the names, give us your feedback. And we did just a little bit of a internal little study, and it stuck. And it's one of those things that you think, those little decisions years ago, and how I think what still get us really kind of pumps us up. There's still three of us are still there from the original days of Bluebeam, to the original developers. myself, we're still there. And I think we're still to this day, 23 years plus in, it just, it brings a joy to us to, be on an airplane or, see somebody using review, or we go into our customers' offices and everybody's got it. And just know that Bluebeam name has been pretty well recognized worldwide. And
Totally.
it's humbling, it's motivating. It makes us, still want to really push the industry forward in the Bluebeam way, the way that we've, I think, have achieved in the past.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, what your kind of initial minimum viable product was. We have a lot of founders, a lot of startup developers who, software developers who listen to this podcast. And there's always kind of like this, this quest to get something out there that you can sell to
Yeah.
customers. Was it really like a PDF print driver for AutoCAD? Like,
Yeah.
tell us how that kind of decision making went. I mean, obviously it's evolved way beyond that, but what was the initial thing that you went to market with?
Yeah, so the initial product was push button PDF for AutoCAD. It was 3 buttons, showed up in AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT. It is effectively a print driver. It handled batch PDF creation, but it really was the pain point. I think every innovator, every entrepreneur, you're solving problems, right? That's the thing that will get people to write a check is you're helping to solve a pain, and
Mm-hmm.
having to deal with consistent PDF creation was the challenge at the time. And so we, spent 3 years really honing that, developing that. We actually were OEMing the PDF creation out of SolidWorks. So early on, we worked with the SolidWorks folks, and had a great experience with SolidWorks, and that was another path. And we had done I think that really was kind of the main motivator. But then as there's always this balance of focus and then growing the market, and I think there came a time when we probably could have spent another 5+ years really honing that plugin, but obviously the window on that it would prevent expansion and growth, and that's where, as working with customers and understanding now, okay, PDFs are created, now we want to be able to collaborate on them, be able to mark up with them. It really drove an internal effort to say, okay, well, maybe let's see if we can render PDF. Let's see if we can provide a way of marking up that just isn't out there. And I think it felt like there was a bit of a R&D effort internally, and we proved ourselves that we could do it, and that motivated really our next decade of work. So 2005 up through really 2014, 2015, we have been developing review and adding capabilities. I used to, and it took a long time to really get it to a point where it was, we hit product market fit with that. As I would joke, like, I'd be one of the guys going out, demoing, work with the engineering teams. Like my role was head of engineering and chief technology officer for most of the history of Bluebeam. But then when you're small, you're doing everything. And so part
Mm-hmm.
of the gig was going out and demoing the software. And there was always that first release of review, you demo it, and there was always this interaction where, can it do this? Yeah, it can do that. Can it do the next thing? Oh, sorry, it can't. So you go back, you develop, you come out with another version, and then there comes a time. Can it do this? Yeah. Can it do that? Yeah. Can it do that? Oh, yeah. And let me show you 1 or 2 different ways of doing that. And then you start to build where you can get further into the demo before you can say,
Before you say no.
before you say no. But there was a magical point, review 7 in that era, where it's like, oh my goodness, this was, we hit it, you knew, and it became this I used to love to do demos because it was almost like a revival, sort of a thing. Can I do this? Oh, let me show you. And then, customer says, oh, I found another way to do this. And I just really enjoyed that interaction and seeing that you're meeting a need. It really, really motivated all of us. And, always try to bring that back into the office and really motivate us to do even better with that next release. We had a joke, review, next, whatever. It's going to be the best release ever, because it's always going to be always better. Yeah.
The last one was the worst one.
Yep.
Yeah. So who was your initial customer set? Was it really all in the aerospace industry? I mean, you said anything larger than 8.5 by 11, and then immediately I start thinking of, okay, who's printing sheets, right? And obviously architects, contractors, and things like that. But I'm curious if you had AEC in your sights in that initial time period, or where'd you go?
So it was a pivot early on. I think we, manufacturing aerospace. It's interesting looking back to look forward now, and we're going to have a whole conversation about model-based design. Like the challenges we were facing in aerospace 25, 30 years ago. You see echoes of it, here in our industry, and I think there's a huge opportunity there. But we realize that architecture, engineering, a lot larger opportunity now. Consider when we're a plug-in, you're looking at, okay, well, what do we plug into? There at the time, the industry was very fractured in the manufacturing world. You had pro engineer, tens, hundreds of thousands of seats of software, and then you had AutoCAD. And so realizing that, oh, well, if we're going to be a plug-in initially, we want to, target that larger opportunity. And our one of our original CEOs, his family was in architecture, and we started really understanding the architecture market, and we realized that there was a real need in that space. And as we started to introduce and beta test, our first testers were architects, primarily engineering firms, as the creators of the those drawing sets that were going to be built off of. Nice. And so that really is kind of where we focused on that.
Interesting. I'm curious if your early customers surprised you with the way they were using your software. I mean, obviously they're asking for features. Yeah. Was there anything where you're like, you're doing what in Bluebeam?
All the time, to this day even. A funny story, it was just one of those things like, wow, that's really a blending of analog and digital. Well, we went to a customer, and they had the Cintiq, those touch, the large format tablets. Screens.
Yeah.
And
yep.
And they had review open, and one of the gentlemen, one of the reviewers, was saying, man, what I love about your software is that, I've got all these markup tools. I can, place them on the drawing. And then when I need to draw a straight line, I just take my T-square and I put it on the edge of this Cintiq, and I can draw a straight line. And it's like, oh my goodness, that's a very unique application
totally.
of Bluebeam. But, but I think, where our software, it's in an odd, we're in a weird, not, I won't say weird, but it's a bit of a unique situation where it's like Word or Excel. It has such a broad usage. It's used across design, engineering, build very deeply, owners, operators, completely outside of the industry, shipbuilders, and all sorts of other applications. And so we don't force a workflow. We enable however you want to work to be able to get that design, that project completed. Again, I think it's a common theme. And so, that's a, kind of a funny example, but then, we're used, of all things, with Review and Studio, we're used for poll planning. People found a great way to be able to use, set up a studio session, which is a thing that enables us to collaborate on drawings and projects. And then you can lay out and poll plan your project or phases of the project. did we design our software to be used like that? Absolutely not. But it's an amazing application. And so I think we've always had those examples of, our customers surprising and motivating us to think a little different about
outside the box,
the
right?
user. Yeah, yeah.
I remember when Steve Jobs announced the iPad, right? And he's sitting on the leather chair on the white stage, and he pulls out this iPad, and like he's reading the paper, right? And it was interesting because they had like some ideas about how you would use this device, but I'm pretty sure during that presentation he's like, "We have no idea how you're going to use this, really." We have some ideas, but we don't know all the ways you're going to use it, and we don't know. He's talking to software developers too. Like, what would you do with this thing, right? And I think that there's something really neat about technology when it comes from this initial seed of an idea, and then your customers are taking that and saying, what if, and how about, and well, I figured out this weird workaround that does this really cool thing that solves my problem, and then you can like take that and build it back in so that more people can benefit from it. But there's this neat give and take that happens with software over its evolution,
Yeah, and we internally we've talked about it how as a company grows and evolves, you always have new people joining, and how do you kind of carry forward the core of the company, the soul, if you will, of Bluebeam. And one of the discussion points has always been it's like two strands of that helix, a DNA helix. You've got us, and then you've got the customer. Like we're intertwined and working together to really advance the work that's done. We're software developers, and we've been just invited to come on these amazing projects over the last couple of decades. And it's moving when I think about it, and the relationships we've been able to build, and these people doing amazing things, and that we cherish that. We recognize a certain sense of responsibility to, when we develop software, like people depend on our software to be able to get their job done, and we don't take that lightly. And it's just been such a neat journey over this time period, and it's still 23 years in now. I'm still excited with the work that we do every day, the cool stuff that we're doing now, and what's on the horizon. It's really just been an amazing experience so far. And every day it's different, and it evolves, and it changes, and the industry changes, and the complexity of projects changes. It's just such a dynamic environment that how we can help be a part of solving that is really the fun part of the journey.
Yeah, I want to talk about what's on the horizon and where you're going, but I want to also, before we do that, talk about this evolution that's happened. So you go from print driver to, then you've dropped some hints about review and studio and things like that, but maybe you can take us through kind of the medium version of that as well, to just talk about how the software has grown up over the last 23 years.
Yeah. So plugin, and then we developed Review, the desktop application, and that really there were a core combination of capabilities that I think really made it stand out. So having the tool chest, the way to be able to define your own custom markups that you could share within your organization. So people use this for building out, almost using it like a CAD application, where you can design effectively these stencils to be able to represent markups, and then extending, that graphical markup. There's a graphical representation on the page, and then there is something we've introduced. It's in Acrobat too, the markup list, but really pushing that forward. So with every graphical element that you have, and you can customize, you can make your own symbology that you can share within an organization, share across a project. there's a mini database of information that resides in that markup. So that markup it has an author, it has a date that it was placed. You give measurement properties to it. You can set status. You can set custom statuses on it. We have examples of using our software to shut down an oil rig, where as you change, the valve goes from open to close. It goes from green to red, and we know who did that shut off and when. And so you can start to really build in elements of workflow within that drawing that you can then capture and be able to preserve as to what were you attempting to accomplish on the project or the design. And so that the tool chest, the markup list, and being able to use those in concert, and then being able to do the document properties, being able to use things like visual search to be able to find graphical elements on the drawing in addition to text, is all this unique combination of capabilities that really shaped the next decade or so of our technology developing. It really became kind of the cycle that we were on after that creation challenge. I feel like we had kind of licked that, and it's like, okay, well now let's make this back and forth interaction work very efficiently.
It seems like the starting to focus on really pro users and like power users, right? Like that's one thing that's always struck me about Bluebeam over something like Acrobat, right? Was like the tool chest is a good example, doing batch editing, right? To very large PDFs, being able to number all your sheets or apply your stamps or remove something off of every sheet that, we've spent so much time creating this PDF. It's like, well, it's faster just to fix it in Bluebeam than it is to go back and fix it in the CAD and then spit it all back out again, right? And I'm curious, like, did you always have that focus on kind of the power user? It feels like you do, because it looked like a pro app, right? It had the dark interface from very early on, and it just felt kind of like this really cool UI. I mean, it was definitely cool back. I don't know if people still feel like it's cool, but it was definitely like you felt like a power user when you were using this app. It felt very CAD-like. Obviously, you have this strong linkage to CAD as well. So tell me about kind of who you idealized as your user. Were you really pushing for that pro power user?
So one of the absolutely, we built very, very deep features, but another part of how we thought about review is also, going back to the days, make it, help the industry is in as broad of a way get comfortable with paperless. How do we make it simple? And so our interface, we have profiles where you can set it up you can tune it to that power user. We have the Uber way of turning on every bell and whistle that's in our software, but then you can also really bring it down to like a reader-like interface. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you can make the interface appear. So a lot of our larger customers, they'll push out a profile for more the administrative user, kind of the the light user versus the deeper power users, and that can be the standard view. So you're not just inundated with buttons out the wazoo, but you can very much configure and control that look and feel depending on the type of person that's using it. And I know that's something that we built into the software fairly early, because exactly that, we did get feedback. Wow, it's great, but oh my goodness, there's a lot of stuff here. So how do you balance that with, once again, the motivation being we want to bring everybody on that digital transformation journey, not just the power users. I mean, that was a problem back in the day. You want to get it off the CAD jockeys environment, like make that project as accessible for as many people as possible, no matter where they are. That was really a big motivator of us. And that really, so there was the plugin, there was review, the desktop application, and then In the 2010 era, we introduced Studio, which was the way that you can dynamically collaborate no matter where you are. So, I'm, here, some nondescript place in Montana, and you're in Oregon. We can load a project set and then be able to seamlessly collaborate on that. Again, I mean, this is a very common practice now, but 15 years ago, it wasn't so easy to do. And it really enabled us to take that next step of elevating collaboration to a new level, going away from, having to email files back and forth, having to, put things on the you said it earlier, the site, not the SysQuest drives, SyQuest drives, SyQuest, yeah, yes. and also cartridges. The cartridges, yes. I unfortunately lived through that too. But how do you again make it less friction between the people that have to make the decision on the projects, and that's really what motivated the development of Studio, getting everybody in that virtual space where you can be collaborating.
Talk more about the drive for needing collaboration, like where that came from. So obviously, I mean, there's this technology that's starting to like break into this, what we now call the cloud. I don't know if we even referenced it being called the cloud back then, but like this idea of you hosting the drawing, or I don't remember. Was it on premises for the firm, or was it hosted by you, Bluebeam, for that to happen?
It was hosted by us. We did have an on-prem version of it too, but much broader used on in the cloud, if you will. So.
Yeah. So when you're talking about collaboration, like I'm sure you heard that a lot from people, right? Like especially in an architectural firm, like that would happen just by the nature of the studio. There were drafting tables, there were monitors, whatever era you're from, there was collaboration because everybody was in the same place at the same time. But we had consultants who would publish drawings or email us files or whatever, and there was kind of this, you never knew if you really had the most current PDF, right? Or you never knew if you really had, because it was this one way, it was this export, and it was just this snapshot in time, and then it was basically a dead document at that point because somebody was still working on that file, right? And they were going to send you a new version of it. And this started to shift that paradigm of like a living document, right? Like it wasn't like bi-directional. It wasn't pushing this information back into the CAD or the Revit or modeling system, but it was collaborative and it was editable, and you could start to track who did what, when, and who was taking care of these issues and all of these things. So we started to see this paradigm shift, and I'm just curious kind of like what you were hearing through all of that, and how groundbreaking that was for people when it came to reviewing, marking up, collaborating on drawing sets.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is where we designed it with the intent, like the studio sessions, which was the idea was you have a virtual project, conference room. So you take the drawings, you put them, on the wall, and we could be right now meeting, adding, marking up and having a call and discussing. I'm adding comments, Evan, you're adding your comments, and we're getting a track of who's doing what and when. But then, I after this, I go home and I have a thought. Oh man, I forgot to mention this to Evan. Let me go hop back in the session, add this comment, so tomorrow we can chat about it. And so the idea was that you could have this this space where you're putting this information. We could be synchronously at the same time collaborate, or asynchronously add that information. And then it had a time period. Like we thought, sessions, they exist for 2 weeks at a time. Like, 2 weeks, that was kind of the default. The end of the day, you stop it and you finalize it, and then it goes back into, your file system for, archiving that discussion or that time period. Well, we find out, people have sessions. It's exactly what you said. They end up just keeping that open, the session, the whole time. They get a new revision, they swap out the new version, and it becomes the live uh, um, project snapshot of what's going on. Now, is that the right thing to do? We're not, again, we're not going to judge on that. We're enablers for helping that project to get done on time and faster. And so, creating the technology, meeting the need, and then letting our users and customers decide what they want to do with that. I mean, that's where, you surprise us and tell us how you find what's most fitting for your project. I mean, the other part of it is that, the unique part about our industry perspective is, in the manufacturing aerospace, a Boeing, or you have a big auto manufacturer. They're building up you've got the same players. You got a very deep supply chain and building up a highly rigorous process. You have a very well-defined path. Every project we do, it's new, right? Like a building is only going to be designed and built once. A roadway will only exist one way, and every project's going to be different. Are there similarities? Absolutely, but it is unique. And this is, to me, what's really interesting about, like, JPL. We used to always say we fly our prototypes. Like a mission, you go to Mars, or you put they're working finally, literally, this is 25 years ago, we were talking about it. This submarine that basically goes on Europa. Every mission is so different, with all the different parameters, that at the time, like, I see a lot of similarities to, how much do you invest in the CAD and the processes, because everything may be different, the requirements change. And, what happened, back in the day, I know it's different now, but, you had to put the spacecraft on the launch pad to hit a launch window. And so the joke was, you do the design, you get the parts built, and then you deliver an Apple box of all the marked up red line drawings as your actual configuration control document for what actually went into that spacecraft. And so, premier stuff, right? You're putting spacecraft on other planets and orbiting planets. That's what you do. And I think there's a lot of equivalence here, where every project is different, and giving people flexibility to collaborate, to, bring in those players, where, the design team, the engineering teams, the thousands of people and players that are involved. How do we provide a very easy to spin up, tear down, capture a record of that project getting done? The technology is not the thing we're shooting after. It's getting that project done as efficiently as possible. So,
yeah. Yep. Yeah.
It was a little preachy. Sorry.
No, that was fantastic. So let's talk about where things are headed and what you're excited about. I mean, you've been at Bluebeam for 23 years, and you say you still show up and you're excited to do things. Obviously, yep. There's something hanging out there that you're excited to show up to the office to work on. So I know you guys have made some acquisitions recently, fairly recently, and so obviously we're maybe seeing some stars off in the horizon here of where you're headed, but I'd love to hear you talk about those now, because this is still like a heavily under development product, right? And you're still cranking forward.
Yeah, heavily underdeveloped, plenty of opportunity. I mean, the industry, it's been, there's so much vitality, so much opportunity, exactly for that reason I talked about, where you have so many different players. It's evolving so quickly with the type of projects, this ever-changing environment, the world concerns, building more sustainably, all of these factors. We again, as an industry, we have a real responsibility. There is so much opportunity. About 10 years ago, we became part of the Nemetschek family. And so, again, Bluebeam, where, I think we we're focused in the build division, and that, really helping to bring the design and the, kind of sitting in the middle of design, build, operate. We have such a broad user base. I think we touch on all of those different aspects, and we have a lot to do in all those areas. And so to help do that, yeah, we as Nemetschek make investments in different startup programs. We have a corporate venture program that we've been fairly active in. It's been exciting. I've been part of that for a while. Is actually involved a bit at the Nemetschek level in some of the venture work that we've been doing. But then we recently, as Nemetschek and Bluebeam, we acquired GoCanvas, and so that really is bringing the field the field environment into the forefront. So we're getting the design build aspect. We've built great solutions there. We have a mobile way of being able to work with mobile and web. We're developing that technology, and where GoCanvas has really helped in different specific areas. Like they have something, site docs and GoCanvas for site safety, and being able to really just easily be able to track what's going on in the field. That's an area that, as you bring the design to the reality and make it as easy to bring the two together and be able to capture as efficiently, as quickly as possible, I think that's where GoCanvas is really going to help, fill a much needed niche that's needed. So I think Bluebeam and us working together, I think over time you're going to see, I think some really interesting, partnering there going forward.
It's interesting from kind of a data capture standpoint, right? Because not everything, like Bluebeam's really graphical, right? And you're also tracking kind of some metadata that goes along with all those those stamps, those markups, all those things. There's like the who did it and when, and what are the properties and all those things. But there's this other side of, I think the GoCanvas thing really is like, you're basically dropping these fields for data capture into a form, let's just call it for now. And it enables you to kind of build this database of information that is linked to something else. Is that really how you see this working? I'm curious, just like where does this actually go potentially in the future if we just had to throw some darts at the board? I know you guys I'm sure you have this all figured out, but from a user standpoint, like what are we going to see come out? What are you thinking is going to happen with this collaboration?
Yeah, I think you definitely hit on it. And I'm by far not the first person to say this, this evolution and expansion of data and information is really the underpinning for that. And this is there's a different aspect to it when you think about it in terms of dimensions, right? You've got the two-dimensional drawings, you've got the 3D models. Of course, this is model-based design, behavioral. There's many dimensions even to the type of models and that we're working with. But underlying all of that is capturing the data, capturing the information as close to the source as you can, whether that's design side, whether that's in the field on a mobile device, like that experience of being able to do that is least of a friction way of doing it, I think is a real challenge. So to your point earlier, people starting up, startup entrepreneurs, kind of a perspective on that. Like it's easy to talk about it, but to actually do it, that's the challenge. And I think is again, as early days of Bluebeam, making that analog to digital transition, you want to make it as straightforward, as simple to do as possible. And so you have different mechanisms for doing that. Like with, GoCanvas, primarily running on mobile devices. There's a lot of technology sitting on those mobile devices. Also, out in the field, it's a freaking war zone. When you go, I can't tell you how many job sites I've been in, and it's just, amazing to see. It not that I've, luckily not been in a true war environment, but you've got, cranes dropping, steel beams. You've got all of these, people, and it's loud, and we're all wearing, PPE equipment. And how do you make it easy to situationally aware the people that have to make the decisions on the project, that need to capture the status, what's going on? There's some real opportunity there, and I think Go Canvas is a part of that. Bluebeam, I think we still have a really interesting part to play there. How do we bring that project data out into the field and field back, working with Go Canvas? There's, I think, some really interesting opportunities there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of having the opportunity to capture it at the edge with the person in the environment versus, a phone call or an email and somebody translating that data, right, between what am I hearing, what am I seeing, is a different thing than the person who's actually there putting that information into a system potentially, right? Like there could be a very big difference there. There's data loss in those transmissions of like where I'm trying to graphically or verbally or written communication does lead to somebody having to translate that in some way, and there's potential for data loss in that situation. So by putting the ability into the hands of the person who's closest to the scene of that happening seems like a big way to get through those challenges of potential data loss.
Right. Like, great way. I love the way you said that being able to get it as close to the, where the situation, if you will, is. And then also the multimodal form of that information. I think in the industry for a long time, it's like, oh, the world's going to models, and when are we going to get away from drawings? It's a bad thing. It's a snapshot in time, and all these reasons. And I'm not going to tell a project engineer what they need to get the project done. I don't think it's a little presumptuous of us in technology to do that, but to partner with the customers, I think that's really the way we advance. And I think it's not an or, but it's an and. How do we, you get this information and then you present it, whether it's a field that shows up on your phone, whether it's part of a drawing, a model, that information together to give me the contextual understanding that I need, or my team, we need to make to get the issue resolved, the project done faster. That's the core of it. And so, that's an area that we're exploring, within Bluebeam. We opened up our labs environment earlier this year to start to invite people in to look at some of the work we're doing with that, blending the 2D and 3D environments. If we take the drawings and then we can see them in a 3D mode, we orient the different drawing views, kind of reconstruct the project in 3D. You say, well, that's weird. Don't you have the models? It's like, well, you don't necessarily. You think about that poor construction administrator. They may not get the model, but they have the drawings. And how do we start to highlight different ways to assemble what the information they have so that they can look at it in a new way to be able to make the decision? Another thing we're calling connected drawings, being able to relate the model and drawing information, but using the drawing as the window into the model, flipping it a little bit. Everybody, we think the model's intuitive. Yeah, sort of. But
if
sometimes
you know how to read it,
if you know how to read it, right.
Right.
And so again, we're not going to force a way. We're going to offer hypotheses. We're going to offer, new ways of engaging with your project information, your project data, your drawings, your models. And then that's when we take that next step, collaboration elevated even more now.
Yeah.
We did that from paper to paperless paper and then into studio. And now I think we're at the cusp of that next era when you talk about new ways to be able to interact with the different dimensional data and project information. And then that you heard AI, that term, is that
literally everywhere. So talk about what you guys are doing with on the AI side of things.
Yeah, and I think with AI, it really, the approach we're taking is, I think, very true to our approach in the past. Like, how do we, again, help move the industry forward? How do we responsibly introduce new technology in ways that help the project get done? We're taking a very mindful approach to that. So, some of the things in general sense, an assistive approach is really how we're starting to introduce some of the capabilities. So as an example, something we introduced earlier this year, there's a capability we've had in review for a long time now, drawing, overlay, and compare. So you have.
I was gonna bring this up later because I was gonna ask you what your favorite feature is, and I will still do that. But this was always one of mine. It was just talking about this constant revision that's happening, right? And it's like, oh, I got a new version of that sheet A3.2 or whatever, and what changed? It's like it's all black and white, right? And so this was an amazing way to just see the differences between these two drawings. It would color code the changes and things. I thought that was so cool. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, well, and that we took, again, this is something where we took two approaches to it, where you can overlay the drawing and have it automatically cloud. Automagically, we used to always say, cloud, and then you could do a report after. And so people would use that for design reviews all the time. Hey, let me Rev A, Rev B, cloud, export that report, and now we've got our design discussion. And so that's one way. And then there's the visual, red, green, right. Just and so that's great. And it's cool when Rev A and Rev B, the drawing, the particular floor plan is registered on the face of the drawing between revisions. Well, that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
And so auto align, which is an extension to our overlay and compare capabilities, automatically finds where that floor plan or that drawing element is, and then automatically lines it up so that then you can do a true comparison between the two revisions. And so it's one of those things where it's like, kind of like, no duh, like, well, why not? Or of course, but to me, it's a really good indication of, using computer vision and other techniques to really take out precious minutes out of the day so you can focus on higher order work. So auto align is something that we've introduced. There's some other work that will be rolling out, early January, a little preliminary, but, I think along the same lines of being able to, just kind of just taking some of the drudgery out of the work that you're doing day in and day out. That work that I talked about earlier in our labs, the relating the 2D drawings and connecting the models to the drawings, that's using computer vision and different AI techniques for being able to register that information. And so, I think that this is representative of our approach. AI, there's a lot of noise. There's especially like on the design, front, concern about, is this going to replace my job? And I think we see it as an assistive, a way of helping you make sense of the data. So we have two main thrusts, is what we're calling intelligent drawings. And so it's this labs work. The auto align is representative of that, the auto align work. Intelligent search, being able to make sense of your project data and have a bit more dynamic interaction with that data. These are really the two areas that we're focused on. But also we don't, as software providers, part of our job and our responsibility is to make it so that you don't have to think about what is driving doing this. That we want to help make sense and act almost as a buffer between the technology and you doing what you're hired to do, to get your job done, to get the project done. And so how do we start to introduce some of this in a way that enhances your work, helps you to focus on the work you want to do versus you have to do? And that's really our philosophy and our approach to working with that. And so, yeah.
That's a very human-centric kind of point of view, perspective. And I'm just curious, maybe we wrap up. I still want to hear maybe what your favorite features are, what you hear from your customers. But like to just talk about the human-centric relationship side of the business and how,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's been important and it's been a focus for you, but is it really the driving force? Like, how does that fit in? There's a lot of software companies out there that are really seeing the AI gold rush and they're just shoving it down everybody's throat. And I mean, you guys have been around for a long time. You've built a lot of relationships. You've worked closely with a lot of customers. This is a bi-directional relationship. You're feeding off them. They're getting work done with your tools. You're an enabler for them in many ways. So just like give us kind of the overall Bluebeam philosophy about people and these relationships and things. I know that that's something that you've talked about being really important in the past.
Yeah, we like most people. No, no, absolutely. And I
trademark,
think,
put that on t-shirts.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And again, it's so many. Once again, it's kind of moving sometimes when I really reflect on it. But it's just such, in so many different ways. Like Bluebeam, internally, the amazing people that have been with us on the journey, and like this, the company that we were able to build collectively. It's been just an amazing experience, and what, over the years, people, they come and go, but, everybody, kind of being a little bit of the almost like the grandfather at the company. You always get that, call, "Hey, Don, you got a second to talk?" And it's like, okay, I know what's coming
you
up.
Can read that card. Yeah.
but what I share with our people who move on is that's awesome. That's a great, like, but my ask is take a little bit of what you've experienced here at Bluebeam and help pay it forward. And like, when you look across the industry, like there's so many people in Bluebeam. So there's many different ways to impact an industry. And yep, you introduce the software, and that helps. And that's mission one. But then I think there's this whole other dimension of, the people that have come through Bluebeam's ranks, and then they're in amazing roles and developing their career in wonderful ways across the industry, from startups to, the old, all the companies we know. And it's so fun to me to see them bringing the industry forward, and knowing that we've had a little bit of an interaction and able to influence a little bit about how they see the world, how they're approaching the industry. And I feel like, we all as vendors, as, tool makers, but then also, architecture firms, like it's a very big, small community, AEC, and we're doing amazing things, right? We're building the world that our kids, our grandkids, society is going to inhabit going forward. And it's all like, we all get to be part of that. And I think really stepping back, it's easy to get, sucked into the day in, day out rigmarole of stuff, but like connecting with the people, realizing we're working on cool stuff, like that is a big motivator. And I think we've got, if we can keep a lot of that in our frame of reference, it really motivates me and motivates a lot of the, people are still around at Bluebeam. And I know the people that I still keep in regular contact with that have that have gone on to other things. But then also, sorry, I'm going a little long here, but, I think in the other aspect on projects, seeing it's a team sport, like innovating and building projects, all of these things, they're team sports, and, working together on these efforts. It's all about the people. It's about the equipment, of course, and it's about the materials, but people are what gets it brought together. And it's easy to lose sight of that, but I hope Bluebeam, we've done a part. I like how you say, to kind of keep the humanity in it, and maybe this is kind of, as I talked about, helping to lead the industry forward without losing the customer on the journey, like introducing technology in a mindful way that keeps the focus on the project and the individual on the project. It's a hard thing to do again, and there's no right answer, but I think it's easy to get sidetracked by if you don't keep that first and foremost as your North Star.
Absolutely. It's that, as an architect, I'm in this industry to create things for people, right? Architecture for people, environments for people, experiences for people. It's not to use technology, right? I'm a technologist, but that's not why I do what I do. It happens to be how I do what I do, and I can leverage it in really interesting ways, useful, valuable ways. But that's not why we do what we do, right? And it sounds similar to what you're talking about here. Like, you're enabling people to do the thing, which this is just a tool that you're using to help you do the thing, right? Like, and that's an important distinction to make. It's like, we don't wake up in the morning to use this piece of software, right? That's not good enough, honestly, right? And so that, to me, is a really great thing to say out loud and to remind people, because I think we can just get kind of, really narrowly focused on what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and it's great to kind of take a step back and remember, oh yeah, like, why did I get into this in the beginning? Why do I still show up to this? And to kind of take stock and really think about the bigger vision and values that happen to be the actual thing leading us down the path, rather than these other things that we kind of get stuck on day to day, because they're sticky, like they are, right? We step in stuff all the time, right? So just I'm glad that we kind of ended with that. I actually don't want to end with that. I want to just hear, like, what are the favorite things that are, features, of these tools that I mean, you've got your favorites. What do you hear from a few customers? I know we don't turn this into a long thing, but like, there's definitely some cool things that the software has.
Yeah. I think, the nerdiness in me really comes out here, but one of my favorite features when we introduced curved annotations, Bezier curves, the ability to, mark a curved area, that was a big deal. I've always liked that. That was something that we've actually been part of the PDF ISO standard committee for a long time now. And that was something we've advocated introducing into the standard. And so when we got that in there, I always thought that was cool. And all the poor landscape engineers, that nothing's ever straight, and we went from boxes to curves. And so I think that was a really fun thing when we introduced that. We introduced something years ago, a few years ago now, called dynamic fill, like where it's almost like a video game where you very quickly need to find an area of a room, as an example, and everything, a lot of times it can be tedious if you have to pick the edges to get that area, it uses this, a way to where you drop effectively a paint bucket, and it kind of dynamically fills in the space, and then you can very quickly do a perimeter area measurement, that sort of a thing. And just these things where it's just fun to use, and there's that delight factor. One thing that we talk about in Bluebeam, like this, people use Bluebeam not because they have to, but because they want to. And like when we hear that, and like this amazing customer response, like, we love Bluebeam, talking about a little earlier, intimated, like, seeing it on everybody's computer in an office, and the positive reaction, because it's the how. Again, how do you get people to get comfortable using an application, and then even more, how do you make people want to use it? We've always had a way of, Walt Disney always talked about plussing. How do we plus this? How do we take an experience and make it a little better? We didn't even get into this. I'm a huge fan of Walt Disney and just like entertainment technology and computer graphics and the history of that. There could have a whole follow on about that, but the idea of making these easy to delightful to use has been kind of another theme. So the Bezier curves, a dynamic fill, visual search is something where I could just grab a rectangle and automatically see where all those elements are. Those are probably some of my favorites, if you will. What about yours?
Yeah. Yeah, well, the compare one was the one that really like formed that thought. I always thought that, and just again, like you said, I'm going to get, this is like shows your nerdier side, right? But being like using computers for what computers are really good at, right? Like the whole batch application of something to 500, 1,000 sheets and changing something. It was like, I grew up in the day of early visualization and rendering where it would take 18 hours to do a 3D rendering, right? And then what happened if you made a change? Well, you went back and re-rendered it. Well, we quickly learned how to use Photoshop because it was so much faster to tweak colors or just paint something in Photoshop and not have to re-render, right? And so it became like this power tool. And I really feel like that with tools like Bluebeam as well, right? It's like I do batch processing stuff to text all the time. I mean, I have a podcast. We do transcriptions. I do all kinds of stuff where I'm going through and formatting and multiple documents and database stuff. And it just, you feel like you're actually operating computers when you're doing that, right? Because they're so good at doing that kind of thing. So I love that kind of stuff when it comes, even with graphical applications like Bluebeam, being able to just plow through a set of documents and make modifications to everything. You really feel like a power user when you're doing stuff like that. But you also have this layer of like artistic tools and, as growing up in the day of, hand redlining things, right? With an actual red pen on a, like you can still do that, but digitally now. And so I appreciate that layer of things in these tools as well. So I think there's a lot to love about it. I really do feel like this application sits on the list of software I like to use for a lot of people, right? And not just personally, but for a lot of people. And there's only a handful of applications out there that I think really fall into that category. So kudos to you. And thank you for telling the Bluebeam story today. This has been a really great conversation.
Cool. Thank you. I had fun. Appreciated the time.